History rarely repeats itself exactly, yet its echoes resonate through time. We look back and see familiar patterns. The concentration of power in the hands of a few, the struggle for resources, the rise of ideologies that promise utopia but sometimes deliver tyranny, the persistent chasm between the haves and the have-nots. Empires rise, wielding immense power, only to crumble under their own weight or external pressures. Revolutions erupt, seeking justice and equality, yet often new hierarchies emerge from the ashes. Technological advancements promise progress for all, but frequently exacerbate existing inequalities or create new ones. Why do these patterns persist? Why does the distribution of power and resources seem to perpetually favor certain groups over others, despite centuries of social, political, and economic evolution? And why do we, as societies, cling so tightly to the memory of our past? We build monuments, write histories, tell stories, commemorate anniversaries. What purpose does this collective remembering serve? Is it merely to learn lessons, or does it also shape our present identities, justify current power structures, and sometimes even hinder necessary change? Consider the economic systems that dominate our world, like capitalism and fundamental concepts like private property. How have these systems and ideas, which shape our daily lives and global interactions, contributed to the patterns of inequality we observe throughout history and today? Are they the inevitable outcomes of human nature, or are they constructs that reflect particular historical developments and power dynamics? Unraveling these threads, the recurring patterns of history, the roots of inequality, and the function of collective memory, is crucial for understanding our present and navigating our future. Today, we delve into the echoes of the past and their impact on the present. What recurring patterns does human history reveal regarding power dynamics, resource distribution, and social change? Why do societies invest so much in preserving and interpreting memories of the past? And how do these memories function? How have dominant economic systems, like capitalism and core concepts, such as private property, historically contributed to or reflected persistent inequalities? Historians, sociologists, economists, and anthropologists offer various lenses to understand these complex questions. Historical patterns. Cycles of power. History shows cycles of centralization and decentralization of power. Empires consolidate control, but internal decay, external threats, or popular uprisings often lead to fragmentation, followed by new attempts at consolidation. Elite formation and circulation. Vilfredo Pareto's theory suggests a circulation of elites, where ruling classes inevitably decline and are replaced by new elites rising from below, often through revolution or social upheaval. But the hierarchical structure itself often persists. Technological impact. Major technological shifts, e.g., agriculture, printing press, industrial revolution, digital age, consistently disrupt existing social orders, create new forms of wealth and power, and often initially increase inequality before societies adapt or fail to adapt. Conflict over resources. Competition for scarce resources, land, water, minerals, energy, has been a constant driver of conflict throughout history, from tribal warfare to modern geopolitical struggles. The function of collective memory. Identity formation. Shared memories, narratives, and myths create a sense of collective identity, who we are, distinguishing one group from another and fostering social cohesion. National histories, often selective, play a key role here. Legitimizing power. Dominant groups often control the historical narrative to legitimize their rule, justify existing inequalities, or mobilize support for their agendas. History is written by the victors. Socialization and values. Transmitting historical knowledge, or specific interpretations of it, socializes new generations into the group's norms, values, and worldview. Trauma and reconciliation. Collective memory also encompasses shared traumas, wars, genocides, injustices. How societies remember and deal with these traumas profoundly affects possibilities for healing, reconciliation, and preventing future atrocities. Economic systems and inequality. Origins of private property. While communal ownership was common in hunter-gatherer societies, the rise of agriculture led to concepts of land ownership. Philosophers like John Locke argued for private property based on labor, but its historical implementation often involved conquest, enclosure of common lands, and dispossession, creating initial inequalities. Capitalism and accumulation. Capitalism, characterized by private ownership of the means of production and pursuit of profit in a market economy, has generated unprecedented wealth, but also tends towards capital accumulation and concentration. Mechanisms like inheritance, interest on capital, and market power can exacerbate wealth disparities over time. Structural inequality. Sociologists argue that inequality is often structural, embedded in institutions and systems. Factors like unequal access to education, healthcare, financial capital, and social networks, often linked to historical discrimination based on race, class, gender, perpetuate disparities across generations. Globalization and disparities. Modern globalization, while connecting the world, has also created complex dynamics, sometimes leading to exploitation of labor in developing countries, volatile financial flows, and widening gaps between globally integrated elites and marginalized populations. These perspectives highlight how historical trajectories, the construction of memory, and the design of economic systems are deeply intertwined with the creation and persistence of social inequalities. Buddhism offers a unique lens to contemplate these historical patterns and societal structures, focusing on the underlying mental states and universal principles. Impermanence, anicca, and cycles. The constant rise and fall of empires, the shifting tides of power, the very flow of history. All are profound illustrations of anicca, the universal truth of impermanence. Nothing is static. Everything is subject to change, arising and ceasing. Recognizing this helps cultivate non-attachment to specific outcomes, power structures, or even societal forms. It encourages adaptability and reduces the suffering that comes from resisting inevitable change. It also cautions against believing any system or era is final or absolute. Craving, ta, and power/resources. Buddhism identifies craving, ta, the thirst for sensual pleasures, existence, and non-existence, as a root cause of suffering. The relentless pursuit of power, wealth, and resources seen throughout history can be understood as manifestations of this deep-seated craving. Individuals and groups driven by greed, lobha, aversion/hatred, dosa, and delusion, moha, perpetuate cycles of conflict, exploitation, and inequality. Economic systems based primarily on stimulating and satisfying endless craving, without ethical restraint, are inherently likely to generate suffering and imbalance. Karma and collective consequences. The principle of karma suggests that intentional actions, mental, verbal, physical, have consequences. While often understood individually, this can be extended to a collective level. Societal actions, creating unjust systems, waging wars, exploiting others or the environment, create collective karmic consequences that ripple through generations. Historical injustices and persistent inequalities can be seen, in part, as the ripening of past collective actions rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. Understanding this fosters a sense of collective responsibility for addressing present suffering that stems from historical causes. The illusion of self, anatman, and collective identity, property. The emphasis on collective memory often reinforces a strong sense of group identity, us versus them, which, from a Buddhist perspective, is rooted in the illusion of a solid, separate self, Atman, just scaled up to the group level. This attachment to group identity fuels conflict and prejudice. Similarly, the intense attachment to private property can be seen as an extension of ego clinging, "This is mine." While societal conventions around ownership may be necessary for practical functioning, clinging to property as a source of ultimate security or identity leads to craving, anxiety, and conflict. Contemplating Atman encourages loosening the grip on rigid group identities and possessiveness, fostering a sense of shared humanity and interconnectedness. Wisdom, prajna, and historical awareness. True historical awareness, from this perspective, is not just about knowing facts, but about cultivating wisdom, prajna, seeing the underlying causes and conditions, recognizing the impermanent and interdependent nature of events, and understanding the role of mental states like craving and delusion. Remembering the past wisely involves learning from suffering without perpetuating hatred or victimhood. It means using historical understanding to cultivate compassion and inform ethical action in the present, aimed at breaking harmful cycles. Buddhism encourages us to look beyond the surface events of history and economic systems to examine the underlying human tendencies and mental patterns that drive them, and to cultivate the inner qualities needed to transform those patterns. Let's bring these reflections into personal practice. Observing patterns in your life. Think about a recurring pattern in your own life or family history, perhaps related to conflict, finances, or relationships. Without judgment, can you observe it as a manifestation of broader human tendencies or historical echoes? What underlying desires or fears might be driving it? Apply the lens of impermanence. See it not as fixed, but as a changing process. Examining attachment to property, identity. Bring to mind something you own that you feel attached to, or a group identity you hold strongly. Gently investigate the feeling of mineness or usness. What sensations arise? What fears might be associated with losing the object or the identity? Can you hold it with a lighter touch, recognizing its conventional reality, but not clinging to it as ultimate? Cultivating wise memory. Recall a difficult memory from your personal past or a historical event that evokes strong emotions. Instead of getting lost in the emotion, try to observe it with mindful awareness. Acknowledge the suffering involved. Can you extend compassion to those who suffered? Can you reflect on the causes and conditions that led to the event, including the mental states involved, without falling into blame? What lesson, rooted in wisdom and compassion, can you draw from it for your present actions? This practice helps us integrate historical awareness with inner work, transforming how we relate to the past and its influence on our present. The echoes of history are undeniable. Patterns of power, resource allocation, and inequality reverberate through the ages, shaped by economic systems, concepts of ownership, and the very way we remember. Science helps us analyze the structures and forces at play. Buddhism invites us to look deeper, to the roots of craving, attachment, and delusion in the human mind that fuel these cycles, and to the wisdom of impermanence, interdependence, and karma that helps us understand them. Understanding these patterns is not about succumbing to historical determinism. It is about gaining the wisdom to recognize the cycles and the compassion to act skillfully in the present. Can we learn to remember the past without being imprisoned by it? Can we design economic and social systems that are more aligned with interdependence and compassion rather than primarily driven by accumulation and craving? Can we address the roots of inequality not just through external changes, but also through the cultivation of inner qualities like generosity, non-harming, and wisdom? The challenge lies in breaking the harmful cycles, learning from history without repeating its mistakes, and consciously choosing actions today that create more just and compassionate consequences for tomorrow. What historical patterns do you see repeating in the world today? How do you think collective memory shapes our present actions? What role can inner reflection and Buddhist principles play in addressing systemic inequality and breaking harmful historical cycles? Share your insights and reflections in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation on how to learn from the past to build a wiser future.